What is going on, Raiders? Soda Dragon here. Welcome, and I hope you guys are doing well. So what have we got for you guys today? Well, we're going to talk about a character who's going to receive some buffs soon, and we're going to examine whether or not this is good enough to make him usable. And it is this champ right here, Jingwon, my boy YST's favorite champ in the whole game. Guys, let's start off by looking at his user reviews. Now, I know a lot of people say don't trust the user reviews, and I'm not really sure why, because in general, I think the user reviews are helpful and most times are accurate. Now, one thing I will say is they don't distinguish between early game, mid game, or late game. So that's the only flaw that I see. For example, Kale is rated really high, right? But really that's for early game. You can use a mid game, but late game, you're really not going to use your Kale. So his really high ratings, for example, don't translate into that area of the game where you're end game. So besides that distinction that they don't make there, in general, I tend to like and I tend to agree with the user reviews. So what does Jingwon, a Void Legendary, have for his user reviews? Let's see. And it looks like, I don't know guys, I'm seeing a lot of red here. Okay, it is all red. So it looks like most of the people that actually have this champ don't think he's that useful. But he's going to receive a buff soon, and some people think this is going to raise him to God tier for the Hydra. So firstly, we're going to talk about the buffs that he's going to receive, and then we're going to talk about whether or not these buffs are going to make him God tier in the Hydra, God tier anywhere, or just basically useful enough to get him out of your vault. So let's talk about what his skills are right now and what they're going to be. Starting with this A1 here, Doom Exchange. Attacks one enemy. Transfers a random debuff from this champion to the target. Damage based on HP. Now this A1 is going to receive a buff, and it's going to be a huge one. So instead of this weak transfer 1 debuff, A1 is going to be a full-on Lysandra A1, meaning it's going to transfer all debuffs from Jingwon to his target. Now guys, remember, just like Lysandra A1, this is probably going to function like hers insofar as that it's not irresistible. So for example, if your target has high resistance, then yes, you will not transfer those debuffs over. And if the target has blocked debuffs, you will not transfer those debuffs over. What will happen? In those cases, his A1 is going to act like a full cleanse, which is still pretty good. So all his debuffs will be removed from him. So his A1 goes from blah, as it is right now, removing 1 random debuff, to stupendous insofar as it removes all debuffs. Next up guys is the A2 Compound Calamity. Attacks 1 enemy. Has a 75% chance of increasing the duration of 2 random debuffs on the target by 1 turn. Also places a block active skills debuff for 1 turn if the target is under a decreased accuracy debuff or decreased crit damage debuff. Damage based on HP. On a 4-turn cooldown, bookable to 2. So guys, this skill as well is getting a big buff. So instead of increasing the duration of 2 random debuffs like the skill says here, it's going to increase the duration of all debuffs by 1 turn. So the same duration increase, but all debuffs instead of 1 debuff. And also, instead of placing block debuffs for 1 turn, it's going to place block debuffs for 3 turns. Now, the conditions are still the same. You still need that decreased accuracy or decreased crit damage, but block active skills for 3 turns on a single target is pretty good. So guys, what do I think about this rework? Well, as far as the first part where he's increasing the duration of all debuffs on target by 1 turn, it might sound like a big buff, and yes, it is from where it was, but there are champions that can increase the duration of all debuffs on all targets by 1 turn, not just a single target. So as far as that, when you look at it that way, it's actually not that impressive. I mean guys, check out Flesh Tear's A3 here. Remember, he's only an epic, not even a void epic. Check this out. Lay low, attacks all enemies, decreases the duration of all enemy buffs by 1 turn. So if they have 1 turn buffs, this is like a buff strip pretty much. And secondly, increases the duration of all enemy debuffs by 1 turn. All enemies, and notice this is bookable to 4-turn cooldown, so pretty good. Yes, it is not the 2-turn book cooldown of Jingwon, but still, we're talking about all enemies here. So yes, I am glad that Jingwon's getting a buff to his A2, but in the end, it doesn't seem like it's going to be that substantial. All right guys, moving on to his A3 here, Power Flare. Attacks all enemies 2 times. The first hit has an 80% chance, bookable to 100, of placing a 50% decreased accuracy debuff for 2 turns. The second hit has an 80% chance, bookable to 100, of placing a 30% decreased crit damage debuff for 2 turns. Also places a 25% strength buff on this champion for 2 turns. Damage based on HP. On a 5-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. So guys, the A3 here is not going to receive a buff, so it's going to stand as you see it right there. So what do I think about the A3? Well, I think the decreased accuracy debuff is good, and having it AoE is better. Now, the decreased crit damage is not super useful, especially in PvE. So decreased attack would have been a lot better, decreased defense, something like that. But decreased crit damage is not a great debuff. Now, as far as the strengthen, I mean, yeah, strengthen is nice, but seems a little stingy. It's just on himself. I mean, come on, guys. This is a Void Legendary. Couldn't it at least have been over the whole team? I mean, come on, just over himself. So yeah, it's a little disappointing, this A3 for me. Next up, guys, is his passive, Unchained. Immune to Fear, True Fear, Freeze, Provoke, Sleep, Stun, and Petrification debuffs. Whenever a Fear, True Fear, Freeze, Provoke, Sleep, Stun, or Petrification debuff is placed on an ally, removes it and places a block debuffs on that ally for 2 turns. On a 6-turn cooldown, bookable to 4. Now, the buffs he's going to get to this passive make some people think that after he's buffed, this guy's going to be god tier for the Hydra. So as far as the first part of his passive where he's immune to CC effects, that is going to stay the same. So the cooldown does not apply to this first part where he's immune to all these CC effects. He's just going to be immune to them, period. So basically, you cannot CC this guy. Now, guys, it doesn't mean you can't decrease this guy's turn meter, put a decreased speed on him, or put his skills on cooldown. So yeah, there are ways to slow this guy down, but as far as a hard CC, like a stun, sleep, fear, or something like that, no, you cannot do it to Jingwon ever. Now, the second part here is going to get a big buff. So instead of removing those CC effects from only one ally, this passive is going to remove it for all allies. And any allies that do have those CC effects removed are going to receive a block debuffs buff for 1 turn instead of the 2 turns. Now, how this exactly functions is kind of complicated, so let me explain it. We'll use as our example Inquisitor Shamail here, which has a passive which is going to function pretty similar to how Jingwon's passive will function once it's buffed. But there are some huge differences though, which we'll talk about. Let's go over his passive here, Dauntless. Each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 7.5%. Whenever an ally receives a Fear or True Fear debuff from an enemy, this skill will instantly remove the debuff and fill that ally's turn meter by 15%. So guys, let's talk about how this works, in particular the fear removal. Now, we're not concerned about the turn meter increase right now, just forget about that, right? All we're concerned about is that fear removal, because that's what's applicable to Jingwon. So basically, how does Inquisitor Shamail work with this fear removal? Basically, anytime an ally takes a turn, he's going to remove all fears from all allies. Anytime one ally takes a turn, he removes all fears from all allies. That's the way it works. He doesn't just remove one fear from the ally taking a turn, he removes all fears from all allies. And guys, notice another key thing here. There are no cooldowns for this passive. It just always works. Now guys, back to Jingwon and his upgraded passive. Now, it looks like on the face of it, his upgraded passive is going to be better than Shamail's, right? Because not only does he remove the fears, but he removes every other CC as well, whereas Shamail only removes fears. So as far as how exactly this passive works, it's going to function very similar to Shamail. So anytime an ally takes a turn, basically this passive is going to check all allies for any CC effects. And if any allies have a CC effect on them, this passive is going to try to remove all CC effects from all allies at the same time. So it's not going to remove them one by one. It's all or nothing. So is this guy going to be god tier for Hydra? Well guys, remember there's a cooldown here, a pretty lengthy one. Even booked, you have a 4-turn cooldown. That is a really long time, even for a full team cleanse of CC effects. I mean guys, for comparison, check out Skytouch Shaman right here in Epic. So her A2 here not only removes all CC effects from all allies, but removes all debuffs from all allies, period. Way much more than Jingwon's passive, and this is on a book 4-turn cooldown too. And it puts block debuffs for 2 turns instead of just 1 from Jingwon's as well, and it puts revive on death for 2 turns as well. So is Jingwon going to be god tier for the Hydra? Well, I think the people that thought this probably forgot that this passive here does have a cooldown associated with it. No, it's not as good as Shamail's. Sure, Shamail only removes 1 CC effect, but it's the one you need against the Torment Head, and it has no cooldown. Versus this, yeah, it removes more CC effects, but it has a horrible 4-turn cooldown. Like I showed you, Skytouched A2 is so much better than this passive, and she's just an epic. So does this mean Jingwon is still going to be trash and a Vault Guardian after the update? I actually don't think so. In fact, I think Jingwon is going to be god tier after this update, just not god tier for the Hydra. So what's he going to be god tier for, you might ask? Well, I think he could be god tier for the arena after this update. Here's why. Jingwon's updated passive is going to check everybody on your team for CC effects after anybody takes a turn, whether or not it's your allies or your enemies. Yes, I said your enemies. Every time your enemy takes a turn, anybody on the enemy team, Jingwon's passive is going to check your whole team for any CC effects. And if they're there, he's gonna cleanse them and put that block debuffs there. What does this mean? Basically, Jingwon can act as your arena CC cleanser, even on a go second team, because he doesn't even have to take a turn. Once again, the way his passive works is it checks for those CC effects when anybody takes a turn, even your enemies. So you get a free cleanse from this guy, and yes, he doesn't even have to take a turn. So against go first teams with a single CC champ, that first CC will not work. It will be cleansed. Your team will be able to take their turns freely, and every 4 turns, this thing is gonna work again. So there you guys go. I don't think Jingwon is gonna be god tier for the Hydra, or even any more useful than he already is for the Hydra, just to be honest. But I think he has potential to be god tier in the arena for go second teams, because your first round against CCs are absolutely cleansed for free. He doesn't even have to take a turn. All right, guys, that is it. Make sure to let me know in the comments what you think about this, or where you think Jingwon is going to be useful after he gets buffed. And if you haven't yet, like, subscribe, and share. Turn on all notifications. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.